So I wanted to mention this book, Liberation in the Palm of the Hand, which is a long-rim text. It was a series of teachings given by Bonka Rinpoche many years ago, and it's translated into Spanish. And so this is a really good place to find things like criteria for karmic strength, what makes something heavy or light, the whole section on ethical discipline, all these things. So it looks like a big, big scary giant book, but you can, it's not like you read it like a novel and start at the beginning and, read it like that. You can actually use it as a reference book, check, okay, where is the ethics part, okay, use it as a reference. It's of course great if you can read the whole thing, but it's the sort of book that is just good to have knowledge of, because a lot of the questions that we have are just right in there, and you can just look it up, and it's arranged really in a nice linear way. So, okay, everybody back? Yeah? Okay. So take a minute and reset your motivation. And so I think that, of course, the purpose of my life is to free all sentient beings from suffering, bring them to the perfect happiness of enlightenment. But in order to do that, I must understand cause and effect. I must break the samsaric cycle in myself. I must become disillusioned with samsara. I need real renunciation, a determination to be free from suffering and its causes. Otherwise, I'm half working for others and half trying to stay comfortable in samsara. And so we study the 12 links in order to end the 12 links. Okay. So, excuse me, we're going to go into a little bit about what makes karma heavy and light. I think it's helpful to know. Some of it's quite intuitive. But if you're wondering where this particular list came from, it's coming from the Longrim Chenmo. So this is a commentary on the Longrim Chenmo, but the root text by Lama Tsongkhapa has been translated into a few languages, but I don't know if it's completely translated in Spanish yet. Is it? Yep. So it's, I think, in volume 2. So you'll find some of this in the section on ethical discipline and karma, cause and effect. You'll find some of this in the section on the 12 links, but it's all in there. So the most important is the first 4. Who are you doing this action towards? Who is the recipient? Yeah, in terms of not their significance in the world or in society, but their significance in terms of your relationship to them. So actions between Dharma brothers and sisters are very, very significant. So people you study with and you practice with, people who have the same teacher, doing kind things and doing negative things is much, much greater karma than if it was just a stranger. Why do you think that would be? Just logically. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Context.
Porque se hace más daño. Hacemos más daño.
The harm is greater.
Because?
¿Por qué?
Porque esa persona tenía confianza en nosotros.
That person trusted us.
Porque es un objeto de refugio.
Also because an object of refuge.
Sangha.
Sangha.
Yep, relatively. Yep. It's also because of the potential for long-term benefit or the potential for long-term harm. If you've created these strong karmic connections, you're going to keep meeting each other. Yeah, life after life, you're going to keep bumping into each other. And so it's got this real ripple effect of if you're creating a positive connection with someone, you have that beautiful experience that a lot of us know, where you come into a Dharma center for the first time, you meet someone, and immediately you're friends. Yeah, there's just like an immediate deep connection, there's an immediate understanding and affinity, even though you don't know the details of each other's lives. There's that real like, ah, yeah, my old friend, even though you've just met. And there can be that situation, which we probably all know, of coming into a Dharma center and just immediately not liking someone. For no reason, right? Nothing has happened, there's been no conflict, but we just are like, oh, just the sight of them, yeah? And it doesn't make any sense, and then we feel like, oh God, we're not a good person, yikes, why am I so judgmental of this poor person? I don't even know them. But you've got some old karma together, yeah? So assume that people you study and practice with, you're going to keep bumping into. Yeah, like your family, yeah? Your family you have strong karmic connections with as well. And so, good and bad, what you do is going to have a far longer and far deeper effect than things happening incidentally with strangers because of your relationship. So it's worth really giving some attention to our relationships. Really thinking, how do we make all of these a little bit more healthy? How do we work on asking forgiveness, giving forgiveness? How do we work on having patience with certain little things that annoy us? How do we work on our communications so that we're just a bit more smooth with each other, you know, a bit more gentle? Because it's not going to just get better by waiting. Yeah, you could wait someone out, just wait for them to die. Yeah, life will be easier once you pass on. Then you're just going to meet them again. Yeah, so that doesn't really work. Yeah, does it make sense? It's interesting, right? Because it's really named that relationships have significance, not from their own side, but they have significance because of the repetitive karmic connections. We get these stronger and stronger bonds. Yeah, so for example, your mother is not more important than any other mother, but she is more important to you because of your close karmic relationship. Yeah, for good or for bad. Right? And of course, all sentient beings have been your mother at some point, and have been kind or not kind, good mothers or bad mothers. And we think of that in order to want to repay that kindness, in order to have respect, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the mother of this life is, you know, she was like your first teacher. She was like your first guru. Taught you how to walk, maybe, taught you how to speak. So even if she was not ideal in other ways, having some gratitude for that will help the next time you meet her, in whatever form you both are in at that time. You know, for example. So it's natural to have some resistance and some worry when you think about this. Yeah, it's natural to be like, oh dear, I have some letters to write. Yeah, some phone calls to make. Yeah, some purification to do. But also some things to really celebrate. You know, there probably are some friends or some family members that we've given a lot of time and a lot of effort into trying to make things better between us. And even if you haven't been successful, that time wasn't wasted. All of that time trying to make things more harmonious is a good mental training. And it's not going to just fizzle into nothing. It's really an important work that we've all done with, you know, different difficult people in our life. So value that, you know, feel some satisfaction in having put that effort in. And the people that we get along with really well, and it's really easy, and it's just really nice between us, and they pass away, you can be quite confident you'll meet them again. You don't have to hope and pray and may it happen in a kind of desperate way. It'll just happen. You have strong karma. In fact, in a lot of other traditions of Buddhism, they don't even look for their teachers after they die. You know, in Tibetan Buddhism, we have this tradition of when our teacher dies, then we look for their reincarnation, and we make sure they're well educated, and the same students try to follow them, and, you know, it's this whole process, which is quite lovely and also has some problematic elements. But in a lot of other traditions, they just know. The karma between student and teacher is really strong. You'll meet again. You don't have to force it. Yeah? I even think of my own situation with my own teacher. You know, I was living in America, I was, you know, had a solid job, I had a little house, my veggie garden was going well. There was no reason for me to abruptly leave and move to Australia, where I met my teacher. Yeah, but one day I just had the thought, I should get my passport organized. It was a random thought, I had no travel plans. I just need to get my passport sorted. And then a few weeks later, a friend of mine came into work and said, oh, I was in this place in Australia. It was one of those crazy Tibetan Buddhist centers like you like. I could really see you there. I said, what's the name? And she said, Chenrezig Institute. And all it took was the word Chenrezig, you know, the Buddha of compassion, who His Holiness is. And my link has always been with His Holiness. And I thought, oh, I'm going. And I organized my life and went 2 weeks later. It was very abrupt. But it's like I finally had the openness and the stability and the readiness that I was ready for my teacher. And so then it could just be that he pulled me across the world, yeah, with his hook of compassion, and I arrived at his feet and was like, oh, hey! Not even knowing I was looking for him. But when he appeared in front of me, I was like, oh, yeah! Even though I didn't even know how to pronounce his name. There was that just happy familiarity. Like we have with a lot of our friends in our life, or different significant mentors, where just upon meeting them, there's that like, I get you, you get me, we get each other, right? You know that feeling? So, you know, this can be really good news as well. Yeah, that our good, healthy relationships, that we've put so much work into maintaining and sustaining, that, you know, if circumstances part us, either just logistics or death, it's okay. We're going to pick up where we left off. It's nice, yeah? It's a bit reassuring. Can be. Yeah, it can be. So, it's good news or bad news, depending on the relationship. Right? But it's right in there, relationships have karmic significance. Do you have questions about that? Or worries? Or happiness? And you're like, oh, grandma. Depending on your grandma.
Para las relaciones que nos cuestan, bueno, como simplemente no, pero tener paciencia e intentar que sea lo mejor posible en esta vida para que vaya madurando y en próximas vidas no te lo vuelva a pasar igual, o como eso simplemente.
Tener paciencia, ¿no?
Sí, que si ella cree que es tener paciencia e intentar hacerlo lo mejor posible para que las siguientes vidas sea más suave o...
So with difficult relationships, perhaps to be patient and try to do your best so in next life things go smoother, no?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, and also to notice if there's patterns in your life where relationships, different relationships have similar types of conflict, to think, okay, also, I'm bringing out something karmically in people. If they have the predisposition to be very critical, and I have this seed of having been critical in the past, I'm going to keep being criticized. Yeah, of course, if that person doesn't have the disposition that is critical, you're not going to bring that out in them. So, of course, they have responsibility for their own verbal choices. But, you know, if you keep meeting people who are always picking at you and nagging you and critical of you, and then you know, just try to keep finding new people to interact with to escape criticism, and they keep criticizing you, you know, it's worth looking at, what do I need to purify as well? Yeah, what patterns do I seem to keep recreating? It's not just about the people, you know, it's about kind of something I haven't worked through in my life. So that's useful, you know. We can notice that in relationships, in coworker relationships, in, you know, I remember having the same boss 4 times in a row in 4 different forms, and I suddenly had the idea, oh, perhaps it's me. You know, how embarrassing. Maybe I have a work style that is bringing out a certain worry in employers. Oh, right, okay. Let's look at that. You know, even if those bosses were power hungry and disrespectful or rude in some way, that's on them. But the fact that I was the one receiving it, says something about me too, so I need to look at that. What am I recreating? You know? So these can be really useful explorations to do, these karmic patterns. Yeah. So it's a very different thing to take responsibility than to attribute fault and blame. Yeah, we never want to think, oh, I deserve this. I'm so bad, I deserve this, whatever horrible things have happened to us. No, you don't deserve it. No one deserves to be harmed. No one should be harmed. But it is natural consequences of something in the past, and natural consequences of some conditions in the present. And so what can we do to adjust those? You know, take responsibility for that without then piling on all this fault and blame kind of ideas, which is not the point and is not true. Does that make sense, that distinction? Yeah. Because otherwise it can sound like, oh, it's just your karma, you deserve it, you're bad. That's not at all it. So then the support is one of the criteria for karmic strength. And that means your own kind of support of knowledge and wisdom. And this one is counterintuitive, it's not what you would expect. It's actually lighter negative karma if you know it's wrong while you do it. You would think it'd be the opposite, right? You'd think, oh, if you don't know any better, it must be lighter. But actually, if you don't know any better, you're more likely to do it again and again and again and again. Whereas if you do something and you know it's wrong, part of you is starting to slow down the momentum of repetition. Does that make sense? So knowledge actually lessens negative karmic weight and strengthens positive karmic weight. So that's nice. The object is like the material or the people involved. So do you guys remember what is like the worst lie that you can tell? The material of the lie or the content of the lie? What's the worst kind of lie you can tell? That you're enlightened. Certainly that is on the, yes, that is on the list. For sure. Yeah, basically qualities you don't have. Yeah, so to say you're enlightened, or to say that you've realized emptiness, or to say that you've realized this or that, it's the worst lie, isn't it? Why? Yeah, what if someone says, oh, do I look fat in these jeans? And you say, no, it's not the jeans. That's not as bad a lie, why not? Yeah, it's a compassion lie. It's still negative, but it's not so bad. Yeah, but yeah, why is lying about spiritual attainment such a big deal? What does it lead to, I guess, if people believe it?
A que confíen en una persona equivocada para no sé cómo terminar la frase.
That they trust the wrong person for the development, like path.
Yeah, exactly. So I have the feeling that people that are Dharma students for a little while are starting to become honest with themselves about what their actual spiritual level is, and are hopefully not so likely to say things like they've realized emptiness or that they're enlightened. But something that we might do, with the best of intentions but is still a little dangerous, is to say that someone else is enlightened, or to say that someone else has realized emptiness, like some teacher. We actually have no idea. And so by saying, oh, that person is definitely enlightened, it's kind of like saying you have the ability to see that, right? You can, like I can say His Holiness the Dalai Lama seems like he's enlightened. He seems to display the behavior of someone who has realized emptiness, but I have no idea, right? Because I can't tell. We can just guess based on his behavior, guess based on his reputation, based on his words, but we actually have no idea who anyone is. So there's a very important quote in the sutras, which is, do not take another person's measure, for to do so would lead to ruin. Yeah. So we can guess, and we can say they seem really amazing, or they are really amazing, but what that amazing means in terms of specifics, in terms of realizations, we have to be a little bit careful how we say that, because it can have that same effect of then people just trust Yeah, they just trust you. Oh, that guy's enlightened? Oh, he must be trustworthy. Yeah. And who knows? Yeah. Who knows? So that one is more likely, I think, than lying about your own spiritual stuff, because we're reasonable people and we know that we have work to do, right? But we might fall into the trap of saying, oh, so-and-so is so enlightened, so-and-so is so realized. You can say, they seem to be, or I've heard that they are, but, we'll see. How do you feel about that? Does that worry you at all, or does it make sense?
Makes sense.
Careful about advertising. Yeah, and if you're at, a groovy natural food store and you see a poster that says, blah, blah, blah is an enlightened teacher, run the other way. Yeah, because
it's also a way, somehow it's when you believe that someone is a real teacher, Buddha, or however, if you get other people to believe the same, somehow that is reassuring yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
In Spanish we say that when something goes wrong for many people, that is a consolation for the stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
So, somehow, si lo que te estoy diciendo que también es una forma, cuando tú dices, no, es que tal es un Buda, es un maestro iluminado, tal, y consigues que otra gente lo vea igual, es una forma también en la que tú te reaseguras a ti mismo, como decir, estoy en lo correcto, porque si todos ven que es un maestro, entonces yo estoy en lo bueno, ¿no? Y le he dicho el refrán de mal de muchos, consuelo de tontos, ¿no? Que de cierta forma estás buscando seguridad tú también ahí.
Yeah. Look, it's tricky because we want to be inspired, right? And we want to inspire other people, and we want to have people have these amazing experiences with teachers that we've had. But a lot of the amazing experiences we've had with teachers is because our own mind was open to amazing experiences, right? We did it to ourselves, which is wonderful. But now we're giving the teacher all the credit. The teachings get all the credit. Yeah, and the fact that we were receptive to those teachings and used our own wisdom to integrate them. So, then also we need to be careful with the Dharma itself, and we can say, oh, the Dharma is profound and amazing, sure, but that doesn't mean it's the best thing for every single sentient being to hear right in this moment. Yeah, people have different dispositions and different learning styles, and they need different techniques to train their mind. And at different stages in our life, we also need different things, don't we? There might have been a time, before we met the Dharma, where if we had met it too soon, it would have been the wrong thing. Yeah, we might have needed to experiment with this or that, or try this or that, and see what fits and what doesn't. Yeah, and then we become kind of a suitable vessel for the Dharma. So we also want to know, what's right for us right now at this time doesn't mean it's right for everyone on earth right now at this time. Yeah, so we want to inspire other people, but the best way I think to inspire other people is just to lead by example, showing that you're happier than you used to be, you're more patient than you used to be. Then your friends might say, what are you doing? You're so happy lately. And say, oh, I'm going to these Dharma classes. And try not to say, do you want to come? Yeah. Let them say, oh, can I come? And go, sure, you can come, but I'm not excited. I'm not excited. It's fine. Just see what you think. Yeah, don't be too excited. Because you never know, it might not suit them. Yeah. And, our earnestness and our pushiness might actually put them off. And they might delay their connection with the Dharma if we're a bit too excited and too pushy anyway. We'll start to sound like a missionary or something, and they'll be like, yes. Yeah? So skillful means, how much of your life do you share with other people, and why you share those elements as opposed to others? These are questions we all want to ask ourselves, because we do want to share and connect, and it's good to do that, but without that kind of hint, like, you should do this too. Because they maybe shouldn't, or it's the wrong time, and we really don't know. And with teachers too, it's like they might really be the perfect teacher for us. Doesn't mean they're perfect for everyone. And then in Dharma circles, sometimes you'll hear people comparing teachers, and if it's sharing, it's lovely, but it's very easy for it to become competitive. You know, like my teacher's better than yours, my teacher has these titles, my teacher has these ways of being, and it can turn from just lovely sharing into some sort of competitiveness. And again, we have no idea who anyone's teacher is. You're like, well, if he's working for you or she's working for you, proceed. Yeah? And if you seem to be getting worse and more neurotic and more crazy as a result of this relationship, like any relationship that is seeming to be a condition for crazy, gently separate, you know, and give it some space. You know what I mean? So we want to keep this real common sense. So then the attitude is the fourth criteria for karmic strength. And it's really about, is your motivation poisons, you know, like anger, attachment, ignorance, or is it like perfections, like generosity with bodhicitta, or joyous effort with bodhicitta, or concentration with bodhicitta? You know, what is your reason for doing things? So those are the main ones, right? Those four are the main ones, and then the rest of them are interesting. But if you can kind of hold on to those first four. Yeah. So then we get into performance, or like how deeply we're doing the activity, how intentionally, yeah, how focused. So, you know, there could be, at lunchtime, we might have brought a fruit salad to share with everyone, and we really wanted everyone to enjoy it, and it's a beautiful thing. And then we're passing it around, and we might sort of lose intensity for this kind thing we're doing and just kind of pass it kind of vaguely or distractedly. So then it's a lesser generosity than with two hands looking at the other person thinking, I hope this is delicious for you. You know, even it takes the same exact amount of time, but if your mind is more focused while doing it, it's a stronger positive act. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so all of our positive acts, all our negative acts are like that. The more intentional and focused we are, dictates the strength. So that's kind of intuitive, you would assume that, right? But it's good to just have it in mind. Then we have if there is the absence or the presence of an antidote. So if you do a good thing, what happens afterwards? Or if you do a bad thing, what happens afterwards? Dictates how strong it is. So when we've done something really wonderful, it's important to dedicate and think, I want all of this energy to go to enlightenment, so that we don't think all of this energy goes to my good reputation. Yeah, or may all of this good action I've done go to people liking me, and make something really good that we've done smaller. Yeah? If we dedicate for enlightenment, then it will bring happiness from now until enlightenment. It will keep having that benefit. But if we think, oh, I hope people like me, oh, I hope people are happy just today, or, you know, some small thing, then we shrink what we've done. Does that make sense? Best is if you dedicate to enlightenment and remember emptiness. Yeah, and remember, I lack inherent existence, this action lacks inherent existence, the karma created lacks inherent existence, everything is dependently arisen. Because then also you don't fall into the trap of thinking it's an inherently good thing that you've done, in and of itself, from its own side, and like become a fundamentalist about it. Yeah. It also protects it from being destroyed by anger. So that's interesting. I think whenever you do something really good, if you remember dependent arising, then it eliminates any possibility also for pride. And it eliminates any possibility for you to be upset for people not appreciating your good thing. Yeah? I mean, have you ever done this where you've really thought about something, done a good thing for someone, and they didn't really care either way, or they didn't give you the feedback that you wanted, and then you're kind of mad at them? Yeah? It's like, well, it's not their fault, right? That they don't appreciate all the work and energy you put in, right? Is it dependent arising? What seems like a really, really kind thing to us might not be that big a deal for them, and vice versa. So if you're not remembering emptiness and dependent arising, you can really take things personally and be like, why don't you see me doing this good thing? Why don't you see this good thing for what it is? You know, they will or they won't. It's dependent arising. Yeah. it really makes you a bit more relaxed with these things too. Because you realize the main thing that you're doing is training your own mind in positive activities. And so you've already done that, the main thing's accomplished. Then if they actually enjoy it in this moment, that's fantastic. But the main thing was your own practice. Yeah. The impact we have on other people is too complex to know exactly what something is going to do to someone. Yeah, we might think, I'm going to bring my mom flowers, it's Mother's Day. And she sees them and it reminds her of some tragedy because it's irises instead of roses, and then she's totally depressed the rest of the day. And you're like, I was just bringing you flowers, God, can't do anything right. Yeah. Like these sort of things happen, don't they? Where the best of intentions, we do some nice thing and then it doesn't have the effect that we wanted it to have. The main point was that you developed a mind of generosity and kindness and love. We don't know what it's going to land like. Yeah. And it also makes us question, why are we doing this anyway? Because a lot of our good things we do in order to get validation. Yeah. Do you think? Yeah. Here's a good thing. Am I good? Here's a good thing. Am I good? You know, it doesn't seem like we're that simple, but it's like under there, isn't it? Yeah. And you know, a nice way to be with people is just to kind of radiate. You are good, you're good, I love you, you're good, I love you, you know, it can help them be less needy. But if someone is in a really attached place, you know that no matter how much validation you give them, they're going to keep asking for more. Am I okay? And you're like, yeah, you're okay. Am I okay? You know, these friends that are like always insecure, they're never going to feel good about themselves no matter how perfectly you praise them. So at a certain point, you just do your best to let go. So then wrong views really influence how heavy or strong a karmic strength is. What do you think is an example of a wrong view? Like a significant wrong view?
Bueno, la gente. Por ejemplo, la gente que cree firmemente que la mujer no vale para nada.
For example, those people that firmly believe that women are useless.
Nice, yeah.
Que lo cree.
Que la gente no vale para nada. Que la gente, que las mujeres no valen para nada.
What do you think is the worst wrong view?
¿Cuál es la peor visión errónea?
Or has the potential to create the most damage?
El potencial de crear el hacer mayor daño.
Pensar que las cosas son permanentes.
To think that things are permanent.
It's related, yeah, it's related to that.
That I exist.
Yeah, it's disbelieving karmic cause and effect.
No creer en
Yeah.
causa y efecto.
Having a mistake about karma can then lead you to do really complex negative things like making an animal sacrifice thinking it's going to bring you blessings from God. You know? And so your motivation is, you know, I want blessings from God to be happy, for my family to be happy, but then what you do in order to achieve that is kill an animal for no reason other than that. Not even eating it, just like blood sacrifice. You know, that's a wrong view. Yeah, it's going to have a negative effect. Even though the attitude isn't, I hate this animal and I want to kill it, it's not a horrible motivation to the animal, but it's still a really wrong idea about cause and effect. Yeah. Definitely grasping at permanence is a wrong view. We have innate grasping at permanence, which we're just, you know, born with, like innate ignorance. But we also have kind of on the top grasping at permanence, which shows in our, you know, forgetfulness that we're going to die. Yeah. Or our shock when we see that we've aged. Yeah. Or surprise when we see our friends have aged. Yeah. We wouldn't be surprised if we remembered impermanence. We'd be like, yeah, of course, gray is coming. You know? Yeah, but we have innate grasping at permanence. That can be quite problematic because then we waste time, right? And we waste opportunities thinking it's always going to be like this. So if you think, this is as young as I will ever be, possibly as healthy as I will ever be, this might be the best version of my memory I ever have, unless I do some like serious Yamataka and Manjushri work. yeah, or some really finely tuned single-pointed concentration in a very disciplined way. What if this is as good as it gets? Then I really need to use it, eh? Right? It's sort of like, oh crap, really the best? Oh no! You know? Because sometimes we are like waiting for things to get better before we start training the mind or start doing our spiritual practice. This might be the best conditions we ever have. So grasping at permanence can kind of give you this idea either that it will always be this good, yeah, or other problems too. So yeah, that's a problem. I mean, other wrong views that are, you know, maybe not so horrible, sometimes an excessive belief in like astrology, you know, like especially if you're thinking that astrology is separate from karma, yeah, and separate from the influence of the mind. If you're thinking like the planets have some plot to like dictate your life or something, yeah, or that you're like innately a Scorpio. It's just who I am, right? I'm all about sex and death. It's just who I am. Yeah, yeah, like it can be a problem, yeah. Because then you can give yourself permission for negative behavior. It's just who I am. Sorry, man. What can I do? This relationship's never going to work. You're an Aries. Sorry. So I'm not going to work on my communication because you're different star sign. Sorry. Right, people do this though, right? So like, you know, like there can be some influence of the environment on how we are, kind of maybe even some personality traits. There can be some energetic influence of external things created by the mind. But to have like excessive belief in these things can be really a problem, yeah? Yes? Is anyone annoyed by this? They're having a really strong, like, but Sagittarius is, they're the special exception. They're always that way. No? You guys are all moved through your astrology phase? You've let it go? Yeah? Yeah. Oh, good. Excellent. Well done. Go team. Yeah. Lots of people have that phase before they enter the Dharma. Yeah. You know, there can be things like excessive belief of the influence of certain, I don't know, plants and minerals in terms of an energetic effect. You know, these things can have an effect, but it's not in and of themselves from their own side. You know, it's interesting, like we're constantly grasping at inherent existence, but very rarely challenging it. It could be that, you know, when you see, for example, a symbol, like a peace sign, your mind is immediately happy, and you're thinking, if we have more peace signs around, that'll really make the neighborhood more peaceful and happy. It'll really change the atmosphere. And it might, if everyone has the same opinions about that symbol that you do. But if people have no idea what that symbol means, it has no impact on their mind. It's not a self-existent significance. It could be a swastika everywhere. And then you think, oh no, this is making the whole neighborhood anti-Semitic. But it could be a Buddhist swastika. Stability. You know? This is the thing, they're not like self-existent symbols, right? And yet we can like give them all of this power. What about a national flag? You know, you see the flag of Spain and you immediately feel patriotic or annoyed, depending on your sort of opinion about the politics right now. You're like, oh Spain, whatever. But you see your flag and you have some emotional response. People who don't know what your flag looks like are not having that response, right? And yet we have this kind of like grasping at inherent existence that's like, this says something. Yeah? So all kinds of wrong views. And this can have an influence on karma, but mostly in the everyday sense, it can be this idea that what we're doing is inherently good in and of itself, or inherently bad in and of itself, not questioning. And then assuming it's going to have the results in the immediate. And then it doesn't, and we're disappointed. So if you're just always ending your sentences with, not from its own side, then, you know, you're a little bit more flexible and in alignment with reality. Does that make sense? Other wrong views?
No afterlife, no life after this life.
Yep, disbelief in future lives,
de la vida futura,
which is related to disbelief of karma.
que tiene relación con el mundo.
You know, because we're thinking everything has a substantial cause, so the mind has a substantial cause, which is the previous moment of mind. Things don't come out of nowhere. Yeah, just that fundamental idea that nothing comes out of nowhere. There is no instance of something that exists that just came about spontaneously with no reason. Could we find anything in nature that's like that? There was no reason for it just popping up. Think of anything, right? So why would that be true of anything else, right? Why would the mind just suddenly spring into being out of nowhere? It has to rely on the moment before, and the moment before. And then, you know, you keep going back and back and back, and you think, well, then there must have been a past version of this continuum, just in a different physical form. Physical form has cause, but the mind can't be found within the body. Yeah, there's a brain, but it's not the same thing. So it's very interesting to sit with, because then if you're believing in past lives, because it makes sense logically, then of course it leads to future lives. Yeah, why would this thing that's got a trajectory and a momentum and a continuity just abruptly finish? Yeah. Things don't end that way. Yeah. Like this. Okay, so then we have, again, the basis, which is like the recipient, who it's toward, but this could be a bit more broad, not just the relationship, but it could be towards an object. So objects don't have significance from their own side, but they still can have significance. So, for example, this is the conversation we have a lot about holy objects, right? Nothing is holy from its own side, is it? But if you put a Dharma text on the floor disrespectfully, it's a heavier karma than if you put a novel on the floor disrespectfully. What if it's the same amount of words and the same amount of pages and the same amount of disrespect, but the power of the object is different? That's delicate, because you can start to think that the object made its own significance. It didn't, right? The mind that created it and the mind viewing it are involved in its significance as well. It's interesting, because it's very easy to either to go too far one way or the other, thinking about the power of the object. Yeah, like all of these holy objects, we think that making offerings to them, thinking about them, learning about them is all really powerful, positive karma. But then you could start to think that they are some sort of like magic, self-existent entity, and that's going too far. Yeah. The mind that created these images was a very well-trained mind. The response we have to seeing them can be very positive. So because of the potential, that's why it's more important, not self-existent importance. It's delicate, right? Yeah, because you can start to think it's inherently holy or inherently not very easily. But how can you say, okay, it is powerful, it is holy, but not from its own side? That's reality, but it's very easy to go too far. So the power of the object, you know, it's something that is very much based on context. You know, if we're leaving aside the discussion of holy objects, you know, if you're talking about an object that has significance culturally, you know, say you vandalize a statue of an important historical figure in Spain, as opposed to a statue of an abstract person who doesn't have a name. You know, it's a different kind of weight, isn't it? It's just a statue of somebody, but it doesn't have a name, it was just the artist making a person. Or you're vandalizing a statue of a specific person who, you know, uplifts the mind of people. Yeah, it's a different impact. Not self-existent impact, but different impact. What do you think about this one? Is that weird? Good? Easy? Objection?
Que a mí me pasa en ocasiones que en los grupos de Dharma siento en ocasiones que las personas a veces da la sensación que necesitamos creer en algo y entonces de alguna manera le damos un poder mágico al tema del gurú, al tema de los objetos y entonces pues a veces siento que me da la sensación que desde mi perspectiva se desvirtúa un poco. No sé si se entiende.
¿Qué significa ser virtual?
Pues como que lo que ella está diciendo, o sea, todo de lo que estamos hablando aquí está basado en que proviene de una evolución de conciencia, es un trabajo, es un estudio. Pero a veces tengo la sensación, cuando me muevo en grupos de Dharma grandes o voy a eventos, que hay cierto punto de creencia en algo mágico que desde mi perspectiva no es así. Eso mágico no es mágico, es producto de un trabajo y de un karma que viene de mucho tiempo y de una evolución. Y a veces ocurre que parece que lo confundimos o lleva a cierta confusión.
Quizás con ídolos, que lo ves como ídolos o como
No, sí, yo creo que se entiende.
un ejemplo de algo.
Pero es que es diferente la persona, que es fruto de un trabajo, a un objeto, un libro.
Bueno, pero es la persona, pero luego también como que le damos ese punto sagrado a los objetos, a tal, y
Sí,
pues,
sí,
creo que hay que tener cuidado en que la línea es muy delgada, ¿no? A ver qué dice ella.
She says that when she's in Dharma groups or centers, she feels that people somehow see gurus or objects as magical by themselves, forgetting that they are the result of a previous training and work and so forth. So it's a very thin line between this knowledge of recognizing the work behind or the training behind, or merely considering this as magic, no? It's happening. So,
What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think you're quite right. And it's also two separate things too, where there is, if someone is holy, it's the result of a process, right? It's not just magically they arose magically holy. It's that for many, many lifetimes they worked on their mind. They started out just like us, with afflictions and confusion, and then they gradually went through a process and wound up enlightened. So it didn't come out of nowhere, that's one. And two is just our projections and assumptions on what someone sitting in front of a group means. You know, if they're sitting in the front, it doesn't mean they're the best, it means they're the one educated about the topic that's being discussed. That's the only thing it probably means, yeah? That whoever is sitting in the front of the class knows more about the topic being discussed than the rest of the class, which might not even be the case, but they're facilitating a process. Now there might be extra qualities on top of that, but to assume that is dangerous. Yeah, to assume that is dangerous. And it also can disempower you because you think they have all the answers, they can solve all my problems, when in fact what's happening here is things to trigger your own wisdom so that you solve your own life. Yeah, so don't give up your power just because someone is sitting in front of you. Use the person in front of you as a mirror to wake up your own wisdom. So you see yourself in your own clarity because there's someone to respond to in front of you. Not because they're anything in particular in and of themselves. They might be, they might not be, but it's almost not even the point. It's just the process that you've chosen to facilitate your own awakening. You know? Yeah, so don't give up your power, you know, you're the one becoming enlightened. They are not enlightening you. You know what I mean? Yeah, delicate. Delicate. Yeah.
A mí me pasa un poco con lo que estás diciendo, quizás no es exactamente igual, pero en el budismo tibetano, al ser otra cultura también, y estamos en Occidente, pienso que todavía tiene que haber un proceso de adaptación a la cultura nuestra, ¿no? Entonces tenemos muchos rituales aprendidos porque los queremos hacer igual, porque los maestros nos lo dicen así, nosotros queremos dar lo mismo y tal, pero a veces pienso, mi mente necesita más simplicidad, ¿no? Entonces todo tiene el mantel, el tal, el cual, todo, ¿no? Al final, para unas enseñanzas de un rato, que es lo más valioso, requiere un movimiento de trabajo impresionante, ¿no? Y a mí eso ¿cómo decirte? Ponemos tanta energía en los preparativos que me resulta un poco excesivo a veces, ¿no? Como que nos perdemos la energía en el ritual, más que en
la enseñanza, ¿no?
Sí, no digo que luego no se escuche la enseñanza, pero realmente hace falta tanto. Vale que vale de preparación, pero entras ya en el estrés del trabajo y pierdes el centro, ¿no? Más que estar en el momento presente abierta y preparada para la enseñanza, ¿no? Estar más pendiente de que esté esto, lo otro.
Similar to what she said before, but regarding Tibetan Buddhism has a lot of rituals, and everything has a meaning, the way you put the clothes, and also they come from another culture, and you try to do that properly and to repeat the same gestures and words and so forth. But she finds that we put too much effort in that part, all the preparation you have to make all the implements and so forth, and you devote a lot of energy to that, and the part of the teachings, the core of the teachings, you are exhausted for that, no?
Yeah.
You have prepared a lot of things, too much time in these old rituals and so forth, and the essential part is not so important, perhaps. No? She didn't say it's nothing. Tú no has dicho que no sea importante.
No,
sino,
I think because if I try to ¿cómo se dice? Entrenar, si utilizo las cosas que hago como entrenamiento pero muchas veces el tiempo te hace ir rápido, entonces no tiene sentido lo que estoy haciendo.
She tries to do all these preparations as a training to be focused and so forth, but sometimes you rush and you have no time and you have to do that.
Yeah.
What is the sense of that? No? Or the
Y
meaning of...
y siento que hay que adaptarlo a Occidente en alguna manera, and I think we need to adapt, but who is the person who understands? I'm not ready to adapt because I can lose the essence, not the significance.
Porque puede perder el significado.
You translated her English?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's very speedy. So you're quite right that these rituals don't have inherent existence. They don't have significance in and of themselves, which is different than saying they don't have significance or purpose. We have to remember what happens to our mind when we do things repeatedly and when we make something special or sacred or ritualistic. So use something that's culturally appropriate, like an example I think about is Christmas time at my grandmother's house. She always uses special plates. Yeah, she has special plates that she only uses for Christmas. And at Christmas she brings out the nice candles, and she uses the nice tablecloth, and she usually cleaned the house really beautiful and put up all sorts of decorations. And none of these things are Christmas. But because of these rituals of Christmas, there was a sacredness to those dinners where we were usually kinder to each other. And we would talk about things that we were happy about in our lives. And we would, have an opportunity to eat more delicious food than usual. And all of these rituals made for an atmosphere that felt sacred. Yeah? And it wasn't about the plates or the decorations, it wasn't about the special food, it wasn't even about the day being Christmas, but because of that significance we decided to give that day, and because of the rituals around it, special things could happen in those dinners. Beautiful things could happen in those dinners, and those visual cues, and those sensorial cues like the smell of the cranberry sauce or the smell of my grandmother's fudge, can immediately bring about a type of physical relaxation because so many good things happened under the influence of that set of events, right? So they're not self-existent. They didn't create that atmosphere. We created that atmosphere. But because that atmosphere had certain visual and sensorial cues, it's quicker to get into that atmosphere when you see them. Yeah? If you're in a habit of developing gratitude when you see a Christmas tree, then a Christmas tree can open up gratitude. But if it has no significance for you, it's just a tree, it could mean other things, it smells nice, it's something vaguely pagan, who knows, right? So the ritual has significance, but the significance doesn't come from the ritual. Do you understand?
Sí, pero yo también puedo ver belleza en lo simple. No necesito una habitación llena de imágenes, por ejemplo, ¿no? Porque también distrae mucho también, ¿no? Depende cómo lo quieras ver. Una comida sencilla con una buena conversación o un momento puede ser muy especial también. No necesito mucha decoración. Estoy hablando un poco ambas cosas, también quizá mi estado mental, porque a lo mejor los tibetanos, yo a veces pienso que la cultura tibetana en el ambiente de montaña, como pasa un poco en Sudamérica, hay muchos colores luego en la ropa, ¿no? Y aquí quizá no tenemos el exterior, lo tenemos con más colorido y no necesitamos tanto decorado, ¿no? Entonces quizá para una mente occidental tantos colores y tanta...
Distrae más que ayuda, ¿no?
Eso es.
Sí tenéis un poco... Es otra cultura, es algo del coche, ¿no?
She says that it's also possible to find beauty in simple things. For example, a simple dinner with friends, with a good atmosphere, you can feel relaxed. And even all this, what we call overload of colors and images can distract you. She can understand that Tibetans live in the plateau, high mountains, they need colors because in their environment they have no colors. The same as in the South American Andes, no? Mountain. But here in our culture we are full of impacts of colors and so forth. Perhaps we don't need so many things around to get into this atmosphere. So we need somehow perhaps not to adapt things to our culture.
Look, it's the growing pains, right? We're in the growing pains years where things are in transition, and we don't want to start from scratch or we will lose all of the momentum that came before, but to realize we already have adapted a great deal. If we were in a Tibetan Gompa in Tibet or in India, there would be 5 times as many pictures on the wall, right? Like for us, this is like slightly overwhelming. Like, whoa, okay, there's a lot going on. But it's already far less than it would be if we were in India. Yeah, or we might light one little stick of incense once a day, and they have like a huge pot billowing with smoke in the corner constantly. So the importance is that when we light incense, we remember the importance of ethics. And one of the side ripening results of ethics is the sweet scent of morality, right? And so we make this association and we realize it's useful to have a sensorial cue for a mental attitude that we all value. So light your incense. But you don't have to light it in a Tibetan way. You know, all of the traditions within Buddhism have some sort of incense ceremony, but it's culturally relevant to each of those cultures. Yeah, in Taiwan they have this whole beautiful, you know, like walking in a straight line, turning at a right angle, using 2 things, beautiful, like, you know, it looks totally different than a Tibetan Buddhist incense ceremony, but still there is a use of incense because it has a reference to a mental state that we all want to develop. And so I can feel that you're annoyed at work. You're annoyed at the work it takes to create an atmosphere you think that you can create more simply and directly. And that is an understanding annoyance, but I think that it's also dangerous to just assume everything is cultural or everything is ritual when usually there is a very profound mind training tool underneath. We just have to take the responsibility to ask for the teachings we need to make it have significance. Yeah, and that's hard because not everyone knows the significance of these things, so it's hard to get those teachings. But it's quite good wisdom to say, I don't want to just do this because it's a ritual, that's silly. Yeah, but to say it's silly because it's a ritual is a danger. So to say, okay, So we don't want to say that it's silly to do something just because it's a ritual, but we don't want to think that because it's a ritual, it's silly. Yeah. And so what you want to do is look at the altar and say, what don't I understand here? All right, I don't understand that. Explain it to me. Right, for example. Right, there's a million things, we're not going to go into them right now, that's a different class. Yeah.
Perdón, solamente preguntar lo que yo no entiendo, por qué hay comida o frutas, eso. No entiendo por qué en los altares, muchos altares, hay fruta o hay comida, le dejan cosas. No entiendo. ¿Qué sentido tiene?
What is the meaning of laying fruit or food in the altar? What is the purpose of that?
Yeah, and I just said there are a million things you could ask a million questions about, and that is a very good class to request from your Dharma Center. That's really important that you do that. Say, please give us a class on the meaning of all of the things on the altar. Please give us a class on Tibetan Buddhist iconography. But if I start answering every question like that, it'll take up the whole rest of the time. So they're excellent questions, and keep asking them. Really, really important. Yeah, really important to ask. But you know, like you had Andy Weber here recently, who can explain Buddhist iconography so beautifully. But you know when these guys are coming and like save up your questions. Yeah? What is the significance of green instead of blue? Why is the hand like this instead of this? You know, ask, right? It's really important. But also know what class am I at right now. It's the 12 links of dependent arising. Yeah, so I don't want to shut you down, but I also don't want us to get lost in detail. Yeah. Like that, and I'm sure Susanna can tell you. So the point is that objects have power, but not from their own side. We need to kind of respect and acknowledge that without getting lost into that. Yeah, like you could have a tea set at your house that was been in your family's, family for, I don't know, 8 generations. It's an important tea set to your family. So if someone stole it, it's important to you that it's gone, and it makes your heart break because of all of the references you have about it. If it had been a tea set you just got from IKEA yesterday, you'd be like, oh, that's too bad. Oh well. Yeah. So it's not like a tea set has significance from its own side, but it could have significance. So it's, it's kind of honoring the significance things have without getting lost in that. And it's also not dismissing things as insignificant just because we don't know why. Yeah. So there is power in making things sacred. Because theoretically anything could be sacred, right? But we are so distracted that we kind of need to give ourselves moments of significance so that we have a chance to wake up and generate some effort for transformation. Once we're good at that, we can do that at any time, in any place, with any situation. We don't need rituals anymore. But they're kind of like the ladders that we use to upgrade our thinking and to lift our thinking. And eventually you don't need those structures anymore. But to say you don't need them even in the beginning might be overestimating your level of mindfulness. Yeah. It's just like what I was saying yesterday about diets, right? Like any number of diets can make you healthy, but just knowing that will not make you healthy. You have to pick one. And you're not thinking it's the only one that leads to health, but it's the one you're using to get healthy. And it's not going to make you healthy unless you actually do it. Yeah. And there might be even things about it you don't totally understand. Maybe the vegetables need to be cut at an angle instead of square on, and you think, what is the point of that? All right, I'll just do it. And then later you come to find it has some significance that's actually quite cool. And you go, oh good, I'm glad I've been doing that this whole time. Or you might find out it's completely irrelevant, it's an artistic choice, and you leave it. But don't assume that it's insignificant just because you don't understand. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So please ask questions all the time, but also have the patience, to kind of like wait for things to kind of flow into you. Sometimes you just need to go through the motions of a ritual before you know how to ask the question about it. You just need to get used to what it looks like, get used to what it sounds like, and then you have clearer questions of, okay, this is the part that really makes me stuck. Yeah, and you save up your questions. Does that make sense? Yeah. So to be a good Dharma student means that you don't expect to be spoon-fed everything. You take some responsibility for your own research, for getting really good, clear questions that you can ask in a direct way, and that when whoever is the teacher doesn't seem up to answering your questions, that doesn't mean they're not answerable questions. It just means it was the wrong person. So you wait till the next one comes, ask them. So it's great that Buddhism kind of is all about you and your own process, but also part of us can be like, oh, but I kind of want someone to just tell me what to do. Yeah. But ultimately, it's much better that we aren't just told what to do. We're told different thought experiments. Yeah, they're thought experiments. And then you try these thought experiments, and you see that they lead to the conclusion that has been stated. Like, if I think in this way, I will have more patience. All right, let's see if that's true. When you see it's true, then you have more energy to try the next one. But you can't be expecting other people to prove it for you. You have to prove it for yourself. All the responsibility's on you. Yeah, which is great news. It means you will escape the cult of personality and the charismatic guru. Unless you give up all your power and think, please save me, guru, I'm bad. Yeah, which is, you know, a child's way of adopting a religion. So anyway, we have to just be a little bit aware of spiritual laziness, I think. So asking for help is good, but really you're asking for things that wake up your inner guru. You know? So then we have conditioning, which is, and habituation, which is about the intensity and frequency of what you do. And habituation is the one that's talked about a lot in terms of, in the 10 non-virtues, we talk about senseless speech or gossip, which is really quite light, negative karma, but it becomes heavy because we do it so much. Yeah. And it kind of makes our speech lose power, because most of the speech we use is in kind of a frivolous way that doesn't have much significance. So it's not a heavy karma to gossip, especially in, you know, a benign way, like about the weather or something. It's not bad. But because we do it so often, our speech somehow loses power. So habituation is a really important one for us to look at, because I'm guessing that none of us are serial killers, none of us are embezzling huge amounts of money from work. We're probably, you know, not cheating on our partner. If we are, stop it. But, you know, we're not terrible people, right? We're doing the right thing, but we probably have a lot of small negative habits that we do a lot. And then they become heavy because of how often we do them. So to just kind of check in, like, are there some things I could do a little bit less? They're not the end of the world, but, you know, let's look at it. Because habituation really has a big influence. But also to use habituation as a way to celebrate your good karma and to notice that there are good things that you do all the time, every day, but don't give yourself credit for. Really kind things, like maybe you're the person in your house that always cooks dinner. That's a really kind thing to do, cooking dinner, right? You might have been doing it for so long, you don't even realize what a kind thing it is. But you, through the power of habituation, you just have that flow of, let's make something beautiful for my family. You know, so give yourself credit for the good things you're habituated to as well, because that has a lot of power. So thoughts on conditioning and habituation? Makes sense?
¿Tiene sentido?
Yeah. Then again, nature is similar to what we've discussed before. The weight is due to the degree of benefit and harm things done. So, you know, I think coming back to objects, I guess we can also just talk about classic strong objects for positive or negative karma basically boils down to someone's vulnerability or someone's benefit to you. Makes things really strong. So if someone is really vulnerable in the sense that they're sick, or they're poor, or they're mentally unstable, doing positive things for people like that is very strong positive karma. Doing negative things to people like that is very strong negative karma. Makes sense, because of their vulnerability. In terms of people who have benefited you, you can think, gurus teaching you dharma, or teachers teaching you dharma, doing positive actions or negative actions towards them are significant. As we said before, relationships that you have a strong tie with, like your partner or your children, close friends, stuff like that. But also people who have benefited you, maybe through charity, even just like your teachers in school when you were a kid, the teacher who taught you how to read. Doing kind things towards them is heavier in a good way, or doing negative things is heavier in a bad way, because of how much what they taught you has benefited you. So it's just kind of interesting to explore. Do you have, and again, karma is really subtle, and to track down every thread of karma is something we can't do without omniscience. But are there questions you had about karma that you were wondering about? Before we kind of leave it?
No, estamos bien.
Like, it's an interesting conversation, but it can be a little bit hard for the ego, because there are things that we've been doing that are a little bit more negative than we realized, and be nice to yourself when you recognize that. Yeah, but also recognize there are good things you've been doing that are even more positive than you realized, and be happy about that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were discussing before, well, a few people in the kitchen, regarding the karma thing. Coming back to the question I did before. The thing when something rises, but because obviously it's like consequence from something that you've done before, and you have sort of when it transforms it into like a mechanic thing, and then you don't have like an intention anymore, but it comes up like it rises. Like in a thought or in a feeling or something like that, we wondered if that's really, if there is an intention there, or there is not an intention anymore.
In every single moment of mind, there are 5 omnipresent mental factors. Mental factors that are always with your mind every second of every day, always. One of them is intention. Yeah, the other is mental engagement or attention. Yeah, one is contact, one is feeling, and one is discrimination or recognition. So you have all 5 of them present in every second. Every second. But what they're directed towards and what they're responding to, is very varied. So, it's hard to say with the example you've given what exactly is happening and where exactly the karma is. But karma is being created in that moment. But it could be the experience you're describing is the ripening into feeling, and you're having a strong feeling response. And then discrimination is starting to label it a certain way, and then intention is doing something with it, etc., etc., etc. Right? So they are all arising at the same time, but kind of the continuity of each one is related to each other. Yeah, so feeling is related to, what's come before in the continuum of feeling and all of the conditions around it. Intention is conditioned by the continuation of intention and all the conditions around it. So even though they're all arising simultaneously, they're all influencing each other as well. Yeah, so you are always creating karma. Start with that. Always you're creating karma. But what exactly is happening in that situation is hard to say. I feel like there's something underneath your question, which is trying to get off the hook for having a bad thought for a second.
No. The point was that we weren't sure that the moment it arises, if there is an intention in that right moment. Because you can, in a split of a second, even if you notice that it's rising, you can just cut it.
Yeah.
And then your intention is not to, for example, to hurt or to have an angry response or whatever, but it rises
Yeah.
as a result of a karma.
Yeah, and you're creating karma in that moment, but what you're creating is, hard to know without
So
knowing.
as soon as it rises.
But which karma you're creating is hard to know, right? You are creating karma every second. Yeah. When things arise spontaneously, like you say, there is an intention present, but you don't know what that intention is. The intention could be, oh heavens, what am I thinking?
Because Luis was saying, for example, it's like something that you don't really have a volition on it, and your consciousness is responding to that bad, for example, reaction.
Yeah.
And that the same moment that rises, you have a positive response, and say, no, I don't want to respond that way. So it's not, because the other thing is unconscious, it just rises.
Yeah, I think you need to ask yourself, why are you asking this question? Yeah.
No, I wasn't.
What are you all asking? Look, the thing is, who can say? It's too abstract a question, right? So one mental moment is so quick, right? So if you snap your fingers and divide that amount of time into 64, 1/64th of a finger snap is a mental moment, right? So listen, right? So the thing is that in that 1/64th of a second, there are a lot of things flickering quickly, and even if karma is being created, it's not a strong karma. It's it's sort of it came and it went, it came and it went. A strong karma is one that's staying for many, many mental moments. You're believing in and reinforcing. So if you have 1/64th of a finger snap moment of anger, it's not huge anger, is it? Yeah. So allow yourself to acknowledge it might still be anger, but it's not that heavy. Move on. Yeah. I don't know what the worry is at the core of this question.
No, it's not the worry. It's the fact that understanding how the mind works, to know if that is a result or is really a decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it might be both.
But it doesn't matter.
Just try not to be angry.
Okay.
Right? If you get angry suddenly, I feel like what's happening is that when you get angry, you're so guilty about anger, you're trying to justify that you didn't mean it. That's what I feel like is happening. You may have, you may not have. Look, as soon as it's clear enough to you that it's anger, work with it. And the more mindful we are, the quicker we can catch it. And the clearer will be where it came from or not. So sometimes things do just arise because of habit. They just ripen quickly, with very little control or influence from our part. But basically as soon as things become clear to us what they are, it's our responsibility to do something about them.
Now I've got another question regarding to that. And when that, at the end of the day, that is an energy that, and that's how you work also in Tantra, for example, right?
That's a longer conversation.
But
What's the question?
no, the question is that
Energy.
What I'm saying is that energy,
Yeah.
you cannot really say is positive or is negative, because at the end of the day, it's an energy that you can use for this or for that. Because you can feel it rising, and you can even feel it in your eyes and everything, but you don't focus it on anything. It's just there.
Yeah. There's a point in there, but there's a danger in there too. Yeah. Just as long as you're not giving up on ethics. Yeah. Because remember, the definition of anger is the wish to harm. So if it's just a strong energy, it might not be anger. Right? But as soon as it's the wish to harm, it's anger. And as soon as the mind is agitated, there's a disturbing emotion present. Yeah. In Tantra, don't oversimplify it, right? We're talking about energies, yes, that are not positive or negative in and of themselves, but for us, they're pretty much always negative. So don't assume that it's positive. Just because you can transform it, don't assume it is transformed. you know. So, you know, if it's anger and you're not practicing Tantra, you can still transform it too, right? Using mind training, you know, using all sorts of things, even just using the energy of it to clean the house or something, you know. There's lots of ways to use powerful energy. But I think that just be very careful about not creating an escape route that justifies whatever your response is. Just acknowledge your responses to things. It doesn't mean anything about you, right? Don't take your own feelings so personally, yeah, or don't take your own mental activity so personally. Have an objective attitude about what's arising, because it's not like you're in charge of your whole mental experience, but we have some responsibility over what happens next, you know? And so as things arise, we just ask, is there something workable and beneficial I can do with whatever's arising, positive or negative, you know? Having a negative state of mind doesn't make you a bad person. Right? Having a negative state of mind is a dependently arisen response that then we try to work with and change. Right? So try not to over-identify with your mental states. You know, if the temperature had been 2 degrees cooler, you'd have a different response. If you'd eaten, you know, 1 more cucumber, your response would be different. Right? Lots of things are influencing your reactions, and not all of them are under your control, you know, but then what you do with it is to a certain degree. Okay, so for this meditation, kind of picture this little circle in your mind where suffering is leading to disturbing emotions, is leading to karma, is leading to suffering. Kind of imagine that in your mind, and then we're going to do an exercise where we picture ourselves breaking the link at each of those opportunities. So before we even start, just take a minute and think about a suffering that happens a lot in your life. Might not even be a huge one, you know, just some like minor annoyance or some physical pain you have a lot, but that often kind of takes over your mind or takes over your day. It could be a, you know, issue with another person. It could be an issue with your body. But just take a minute and think of a suffering that happens a lot, that you don't want it to lead to a negative state of mind and karma. Okay, so just kind of have that situation ready. And we'll start by reviving our motivation and just doing some single-pointed concentration for a while so that the mind is nice and steady to be able to do this process. So come into a good posture. Make sure that you're not straining to sit up straight. Just check that there's not too much pressure on your ankles or strain in your lower back. And it's okay to move around if you need to. And then scan through your body from the top of your head down to the tip of your toes. Just making sure that you're not holding or carrying any tension. Imagine everything settling into its natural position. And imagine that there's a line going down through your spinal column, all the way down to the earth. And it also reaches up through the crown of your head, as if you were connected both to the earth and to the sky. And then bring your bodhicitta motivation back to your mind and explain it to yourself in your own words why it is that we do these practices, and let it touch your heart. And with the sound of the bell, shift your focus to the breath. And don't argue with your thoughts or indulge in your thoughts. Just let the thoughts think. They're not your main interest. Just be as steady as you can be, focusing on the breath without becoming tense. And then bring to mind that everyday suffering that you have often. That difficulty that normally leads you into a negative state of mind, maybe even to accumulate negative karma, verbally and physically. But at the very least, usually disturbs your mind in some way. And so as you think about this suffering, ask yourself, does this suffering have any way of being beneficial? Is there any way to think of it as useful? It's okay to not want it, but since it's here, what's a way to make it useful? And so you can think about the fact that there are many times that you suffer voluntarily because you like the result. For example, you might stay up really late and make yourself tired because you like a conversation that you're having with someone. You might work extra hours because you like the money. You might push yourself physically because you like being physically fit. So there are many times that we have suffering but we don't mind because we've somehow thought of it as voluntary. Is there a way to make yourself think of this suffering as a useful, even voluntary tool to build your strength in some way? And then from another perspective, anytime we're having suffering, it's the ripening result of past negative karma. And as it ripens, it's finishing. And we never have to experience that seed again. And if we experience it without reacting with a negative state of mind, we don't create any more of the same. So we can feel some satisfaction in finishing a particular cycle. Is there a way to use this suffering as a gateway for empathy to develop? And from that empathy, compassion. By understanding our own difficulty, does it make it easier to relate to other people? Just think, is there a way to use this as a tool for understanding the human condition? And so this suffering can be used to develop strength and resilience. It can be seen as a way to exhaust negative karma and make us motivated to stop creating more. And it can be used as a gateway for compassion. And imagine that you know that very deeply, but it was an ordinary moment in an ordinary day, so you forgot and started to become upset about this suffering in your old pattern again. So picture that you forgot all of this good mind training, and now you're angry, or you're attached, or you've become somehow dull, indulging in ignorance. Whatever it is you normally do when this suffering. And then think, in the middle of this disturbing emotion, what can you say to yourself so that you don't make it worse mentally and that you don't speak or act physically from this place? What is your version of restraint, which is not suppression? What would you say to yourself? And imagine that you're in the middle of your negative state of mind. But one part of you is able to remember that you do not exist from your own side. Whatever harm it is you think you're experiencing doesn't exist from its own side. That the significance you're giving your suffering doesn't exist from its own side. It's not important or unimportant in and of itself. Just experiment with what would happen if you remembered emptiness in the middle of your negative state of mind. You can use dependent arising if that's easier. But what ways can you talk yourself out of this negative state of mind? Just using an understanding of emptiness. And so sometimes that thinking will be very effective, and sometimes it won't work, and you'll actually go ahead and say the wrong thing, or do the wrong thing, or increase the negativity in your mind and create lots of negative karma. It's only human. And so imagine you've in fact done the wrong thing because you had suffering and a negative state of mind. The karma has been planted on your mental continuum. How does purification work? What do you need to think in order to purify that so it doesn't turn into more suffering? Just because you made a mistake doesn't mean you're doomed to suffer because of it. So just try and remember what are the ingredients for purification. And so you think about refuge or safe direction from the Buddha as an example of your own potential, the Dharma as tools for awakening and developing that potential, and the Sangha as your supports and your examples and your helpers. And feeling very stable in your refuge, then you think about regret, not guilt, not feeling overly identified with your mistake. Just a calm and objective assessment of a fault to be a fault. Just because it's negative and not useful. Not because you're bad. So experiment with that, just naming a fault to be a fault without needing excuses or justification. Being held by your own refuge while you do that regret. And then just having been very clear about the mistake, you make a plan for a remedy, some opposite energy that clears away the vibration of that mistake or the momentum of that mistake. So just think, what is a remedy I can use? Maybe it's something traditional like Vajrasattva, with a visualization of white light flowing through. Maybe it's an everyday plan in my life. But just think of a very simple and direct remedy. And then to finish the 4 opponent powers which purify negative karma, preventing it from becoming suffering in the future. You just need a very simple and honest plan about how you will be different in the future. A way you won't let this cycle continue. Even if it's only for a few minutes or a few days. Just a very honest plan. How long can you do things differently? And then you just make a promise to yourself about that. An easy one that you can keep. Imagining that your refuge is observing this whole process and supporting it. And then dedicate all the mental energy you put into this course into overcoming the habit of samsara and developing a habit of transformation and development all the way into your fullest potential in order to be of greatest benefit to all living beings. Okay, so of course at any of these junctures or these transitions, remembering emptiness will work. Emptiness will prevent suffering from turning into a disturbing emotion, from a disturbing emotion turning into negative karma, and will purify negative karma from turning into suffering. Yeah, so a very powerful purification tool is remembering emptiness as well. You don't have to necessarily do the 4 opponent powers exactly in that way. If you think about emptiness, it really works too. But if it's sort of too abstract to function for you, just use these very practical mind training techniques of reframing. How can I use everything going on in my life, good or bad, to open the heart, to develop the potential? Because, this is the path. It's not like we have to look for it somewhere else. So thanks very much for all of your effort. I know it's hard when it's hot and when it's in a different language and et cetera, et cetera. So really thank you for coming. And do you have any remaining questions or comments? I don't know. But you can always ask. Thank you guys. Yeah, really. It's a difficult subject to do quickly. The last time I taught the 12 links, I did it twice a week for 3 months or something. So this is the very short version of the story. But I think you get the essence of it based on how the questions that you've been asking and the comments that you've had. It sounds like you all get the essence of it. So anyway, I just keep playing with it and experimenting with different ways to break your own negative habits. Try and think of it as a nice project that you enjoy rather than some heavy burden of self-punishment, okay? Make it fun. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, any questions about this or about something random before we end for the day? Gracias. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. And I hope that you all, talk together and really build a good community together and help each other out on the path. You get better and better teachings in a Dharma center, the more happy and connected the community is, and the more that you make good plans together, like what do we all really want to study? Let's ask the next teacher who comes to teach us that, and then have some discussion group afterwards to make sure you don't all forget what's just happened, and really like make this your home, and really support each other, because Dharma centers can be one of the best things in the world. But if they're too much like a hobby, then they don't have energy building, So see what you can do to kind of like build community and make strong friendships and help each other on the path. And this is also the way to make the sort of Dharma center that you really want, the one that seems healthy to you, that seems transparent and good communication. It's really up to us to make these happen in our own Dharma center. So also, I think this is the last course that Susanna and Daniel have been a part of, so I really want to thank them for their 3 years of huge effort, so many details, so many things to organize, so much to be patient with, and I think they've really done a beautiful job. And when I hear other visiting teachers talk about the center in Madrid, they really have lots of kind things to say, and really grateful for how beautifully they've been holding this work. And of course, thank you to Luis for translating so beautifully. And doing simultaneous is very difficult, and it means I can talk even more than normally. So, thank you. Thank you. And see you maybe next year. We'll see.